Okay, happened. Successfully we came to YouTube. Yesterday, Krishna sir, yesterday happened. YouTube link was not happened. It was stopping between.
Exactly. And I think he just clicked on leave option or something. He abruptly left the meeting. I think he unfortunately clicked on it. I don't know what happened.
Myself I did it because of without YouTube link. There are 500 members are waiting outside. We ended the meeting again. We started. Then we got YouTube link. Again we shared the YouTube link.
Okay.
Now YouTube link came. So we can see on our screen YouTube live is going on.
Oh, is it going on?
Yeah.
Yes, you can see on the screen the top live on YouTube.
Yeah.
So I'm sharing
sir,
you. You want to share too? You can share.
Sir, recording paused. Can we start the recording?
Okay. Even if you start or stop, even YouTube will live will continue.
Oh, okay.
Just let me know whenever you want me to share my screen.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, there is a short 10 o'clock will start without late. Madam, I'm enabling all. Let whoever comes, they will join. I started recording.
The participants will automatically admit. We no need to do admit.
Yes, no need to do. They will join directly.
Yes. Okay.
Sai, after sharing your PPT, right side there is more is there.
Okay.
So in more you disable participant annotation. Otherwise they will write on screen. After sharing your PPT.
Okay.
That you can do yourself, NVS sir. You are being a host. You can.
No, host cannot do. Only who have shared the PPT he has to do.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'll be doing that.
Otherwise, no, they will throw the app.
So what exactly you want me to do?
Just after sharing your PPT.
Okay.
So
In the top, you can
PPT,
be
there will be more is there.
Okay.
Not now, after sharing PPT.
Okay, yeah, I got it. Then after going to more?
Yes, you can go to the more. There you can find annotation box.
Disable participant annotation. Disable participant annotation.
Okay, you want me to click on it?
Yes, then you can disable them. That's it.
Okay. Not audible.
Okay.
Disable participant annotation.
Yes, sir. Clear, sir.
Once I share my screen.
Yeah. That's it.
Enver sir, you are on mute. Yes. During introduction, can you show that slide?
Yeah.
Yes. Once you try that, so first you keep the browser now. Then exactly by 10, you can show the slide and I will start to introduce.
Yes, yes. Is it fine?
Yes.
Sharp. We'll start at 10 o'clock.
Did you know that India
Participant win some music.
Ma'am, did you allow the participants to come in?
Yes, I already allowed them.
Oh,
So many are joined in the. So many are joined in the YouTube also.
Vishnu sir, I have shared your YouTube link to you.
yes, sir, I received. Mhm.
I have shared your WhatsApp YouTube link. Please check it. Okay, shall we start?
Yes. Make it full screen.
Is it fine?
Just you make it. Yes, it's fine.
A very good morning to one and all. I'm Dr. N.V. Ramarao, Associate Professor, Head of the Department of Pharmacy Practice, Chalapati University of Pharmaceutical Sciences. First and foremost, I express thank you our dynamic and visionary principal, Professor Ramarao Nadenla, and management, Sri Y.V. Anjaneyulu Garu, to provide such a webinar facility to not to stop our continuous education to our students, even we are in COVID-19 pandemic situation. I cordially welcome you all on account of Chalapati University of Pharmaceutical Sciences to webinar on International Faculty Development Program on Innovation and Transformation on Pharmacy Research. I would like to welcome Dr. Sharmila Nirojani, Associate Professor, Head of the Department of Pharmacy Practice, Chalapati University of Pharmaceutical Sciences. Read the profile of Dr. Sai Krishna Goody from US. He is a research scholar. Thank you, madam. Please read the profile of Dr. Sai Krishna.
Thank you, Dr. N.V. Ramarao. Good morning, everyone. Greeting from Chalapati. I thank every participant for your kind cooperation, and we sincerely regret for the inconvenience caused yesterday. The participants who has not able to join yesterday, the same link you can be used here today also for the session. So I request the participant to use the same link to join with us either on the Zoom, or you can watch the same session on the YouTube. The session is being recorded, so you can be see there. From our side, that is the kind request. And those who are not received the feedback form of yesterday's session, today you will be received the form. Don't worry about it. So I would like to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Sai Krishna Goody. Before introducing or before reading his profile, I would like to thank Dr. Sai Krishna Goody. Since 10 days, he has been cooperating with us for each and every part, suggesting us and continuously doing support for us to make this session successful. Thank you, Dr. Sai Krishna. So I would like to read his profile. Dr. Sai Krishna Goody is a young researcher in the field of pharmacy practice, especially pharmacoepidemiology and outcome research. Of now, he has authored around 35 papers that were published in reputed journals, both national and international level. Besides, he had attended numerous conferences, seminars, workshops and CMAs related to the field of pharmacy, and also accomplished various certification from renowned organizations. In addition, he is a member of different well-famed organizations such as IPA and the Coalition of Pharmacists Caring for Aging Canadians, Alzheimer's Society of Manitoba, and Brain Tumor Society of Manitoba, ALS Society of Manitoba, and International Society for Pharmacoepidemiology. Throughout his academic journey, he has received distinct scholarships and awards for his academic excellence and scientific work. His research interest includes knowledge translation through evidence-based practice, optimizing irrational drug use, pharmacoepidemiology, pharmacy education, pharmacist intervention, patient-oriented outcomes, and various aspects of pharmacy practice. Furthermore, he holds a huge experience in handling large electronic medical health record databases, which enable to look at the various research questions at the national and international level. And he's won so many awards here: International Graduate Student Entrance Scholarship by University of Manitoba, International Conference on Pharmacoepidemiology and Therapeutic Risk Management Scholarship, Conference Scholarship, International Graduate Student Scholarship, etc. So many awards and scholarships he is having. And he is also certified by the Introduction of Systemic Review and Meta-Analysis by Johns Hopkins University and Coursera in the year of 2018. So this is a brief profile of Dr. Sai Krishna Goody. With this brief introduction, I am inviting Dr. Sai Krishna Goody to continue the session. Welcome you, sir.
Okay, sir, please share your PPT and you can continue the session.
Sure, thank you. Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing well and staying safe, especially during these unprecedented. I also thank all the participants and delegates for your interest in showing up in this webinar. Let me share my screen here.
Yeah, just make full screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. Go ahead.
So you just asked me to go to the mute option and do something. Right? May I know where can I do that? More. Okay.
Okay,
So
yeah, it's audible now. Yeah. There is pen symbol like annotation is there. Beside that there is more is there.
Yes, sir. I already did that.
In more there will be disable participant annotation.
I already did that, sir.
Just click on that. In more.
I already did that.
Yeah, it's fine. Then it's okay. No need to write. You can't find anything. Yeah.
So it's always such a pleasure and privilege talking to the SIPs, and also I congratulate the entire SIPs fraternity for securing a decent NIRF ranking. Without any delay, let's dive into our today's topic, that is importance of systematic reviews with a special emphasis on COVID-19, where I'll be sharing my views and thoughts with you on why systematic reviews are considered as gold standard and powerhouse of evidence while decision making in healthcare. At the same time, I'll try to provide you with an essence of significance of systematic reviews in the era of COVID-19 by giving you some relevant examples to the related situation. So let's get started. I don't have any potential conflict of interest to disclose. However, as always, I wanted to start my presentation with a statement saying that the views and the opinions, whatever expressed in this presentation, are completely of my own and do not reflect any position or policy of mine. Moving on to today's learning objectives, after this presentation, you will be able to outline the various types of reviews in the field of research, identify key features or characteristics of a systematic review, articulate the entire process of how to perform a systematic review, understand the importance of systematic reviews, especially while decision making in healthcare. And finally, I'll end my session by ruling out some of the myths regarding systematic reviews. So let's try to be a bit interactive. I request all the participants and delegates just to open your web browser like Google or Firefox, whatever you want, and just type this in your web, on your Google web link. Just polev.com/Sai Krishna GU027. I request all the participants and delegates to just type this on your web address. It's not on in Google, just on the web address where we type www. and the rest of the web link. We just type there polev.com/Sai Krishna GU027. It's not case sensitive, so you can use either small letters or capital letters. It doesn't matter. Okay, then let's just have a very quick question for your participants. Have you ever heard about any review types during your academics or research journey so far? If yes, you can just type your answers in the box provided there. Whatever review types, apart from systematic reviews, if you come across any other review types, or if you know any other types of reviews, it's not like yes or no. You can just type the review types, actual names. I'll just wait for 10 to 20 seconds and I'll let you answer this question. It's very easy. Just type polev.com/Sai Krishna GU027 and just click enter, and you can skip the first question and then you can just answer. I think you will be able to see this question on your screen. As I'm receiving some responses. Narrative reviews, perfect. Any other review types? Descriptive reviews, good. Literature reviews, excellent. Anything else? Cochrane reviews, okay. Any other review types apart from literature reviews or descriptive reviews or narrative reviews? What's that? Meta-analysis, nice. Okay, I'll just move forward. So no doubt systematic reviews are always in high demand when it comes to healthcare decision making. However, there are wide variety types of reviews in the field of research which are worth considering or knowing, which might be interesting to know. So let's have a very quick look at them. Starting with the narrative reviews, as most of you suggested. And just remember, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about these, as this is not our today's topic. So I'll just list out them. The second one could be rapid reviews. The third one would be overviews, scoping reviews, umbrella reviews, mapping reviews, critical reviews, mixed methods reviews, literature reviews, state of art reviews. Then comes systematic reviews. That's our today's topic, which we'll be discussing in detail in the coming slides. And the last one would be meta-analysis. So these are a whole bunch of different review types that exist in the field of research, which a researcher or any type of a researcher in any field must know this. Okay, let's look at the level of confidence. I just have shown you wide variety of review types. So, but what about their level of confidence or level of evidence? Suppose for example, you are in your ward rounds, your clinical rotations, and your doctor asked you a question, and you have to revert back to him. Then you just search using some databases, and you got a handful of articles. But how do you grade them actually? How do you know what level of evidence or the confidence you have in such studies? So this picture depicts the level of confidence or evidence for the studies or the review types which we have just seen. Any type of review articles which are at the bottom indicates they are of with low confidence or low evidence. That means we cannot much rely on their findings or conclusions. And you can also observe on systematic reviews tops the place. So why do you think systematic reviews are always on the top when it comes to level of evidence or level of confidence? I hope most of you are aware of this diagram by now. That is evidence-based pyramid. It actually represents the level of evidence of different study designs that exist in epidemiology. Meaning the studies which are at the bottom will hold a lower level of evidence with high risk of bias. And as you keep on going to the top, the level of bias will be reduced and the quality of evidence will increase. And if you observe, the systematic reviews and meta-analysis are at the top, meaning the quality of evidence is very high. So what makes systematic reviews to be on the top? Have you ever wondered about this, or have you ever thought about this? I just try to put this question in another way. What made all other studies to be at the bottom? If you know whatever studies that are being conducted in India, or the study designs which are being conducted as family projects, they are mostly like cross-sectional surveys or either cohort or case control studies, not more than that. And if you observe the level of evidence in the hierarchy, the cross-sectional studies are like in between top and bottom, which indicates we might not actually rely on those findings or conclusions, especially while making any healthcare decisions, because whatever the evidence is going into systematic reviews are filtered information, and the information that holds from all other study designs like expert opinions, case series, case reports, cross-sectional studies, cohort studies, and all these studies have unfiltered information. So what do I mean by filtered information? So what I meant by filtered information is that whatever evidence or the literature is going into systematic reviews are assessed for their quality, and there are also assessed for the level of bias or risk of bias. So that makes systematic reviews to be on the top, or at least to give more priority to systematic reviews whenever we want to take any key decision when it comes to healthcare. Sorry, it was muted. Okay, so let's look at what is a systematic review. It's a transparent process that explicitly reproduces and attempts to collate all the empirical evidence in order to answer a single specific question. So what do I mean by this definition? So let's look at it in detail. So it's a transparent process, meaning anyone or everyone can know how exactly a systematic review is performed and what all the elements it included. at each and every step of a systematic review. And it explicits, that means it's clearly a reproducible process which attempts to collect all the information that exists so far related to one specific question, and it will answer that question. So that makes systematic reviews special one. In short, I can say it uses a systematic approach throughout its entire process while we perform a systematic review. That's what it stands out when we compare with other review types. That's what, as I told, it uses systematic methods or approaches. And just remember one thing: if someone asks you like, why should you do a systematic review, or what are the major goals of doing a systematic review, just as a thumb rule, remember two things. The first thing is, the major purpose of doing a systematic review is to improve the quality of the evidence or the literature which we have. And the next one would be to decrease the bias or risk of bias that exists in that literature. So these two are the major goals or the purpose of conducting any systematic review. So it uses systematic methods with a view of minimizing bias, and thus provide more reliable findings from which conclusions can be and thus decisions can be made. And then meta-analysis, if you just pool the data of systematic review as a quantitative way, it is known as a meta-analysis. Meaning systematic review is mostly sort of a qualitative review, and it just deals with qualitative aspects of a evidence or the literature. And if you pool that data into quantitative way, that is known as meta-analysis. Meaning systematic review is the first step, and then it is followed by a meta-analysis. But it doesn't mean that every systematic review must have a meta-analysis, but every meta-analysis should have a systematic review. I hope the concept is very clear. So here is again a poll question. So it's time to take up your phones and just as I told before, just type pollev.com/SaiKrishnaGU027. I suggest you to put this aside, I mean, as a separate tab if you're using your mobiles, because I'll be keep on asking you some interesting questions during my presentation, so you can just interactively participate in this. So the question is, systematic reviews are same as literature reviews, but just bigger in size. Is it true or false? I repeat the question, are systematic reviews the same as literature reviews, but just bigger in size? Do you agree with this statement or disagree, or maybe, or you don't know about this at all? Okay. I can see a spread of options. Okay, most of you said you'll agree with this statement, which is not true at all. And just 20% of you told you'll disagree with this statement, which I can consider them as the true researchers. Okay. Now I can see the agree, the participants who opted for agree is rapidly reducing, and people are more inclined towards disagree option. Perfect. So it's a myth actually. Systematic review is not a literature review. There are a lot of differences between a literature review and a systematic review. So this statement is not true. So let's move on. Who does systematic reviews? Like, I'm not talking about individual level. I'm talking about organizational level. I mean, anyone can do a systematic review, but still, which organization does or conduct systematic reviews? So these are some of the well-known reputed organizations and institutions around the world which does systematic reviews. Among these, Cochrane Collaboration is an independent global network Sorry, it's being muted. Okay, sorry for the inconvenience. So these are some of the well-known reputed organizations which perform systematic reviews. And among these, Cochrane Collaboration is a global research network which performs systematic reviews at a larger scale around the world. So let's very quickly look at the key characteristic features of a systematic review. What a typical or ideal systematic review should have. So it should have a clearly stated objectives with a predefined eligibility criteria. Whenever you get an idea of doing a systematic review, the first step is to, you have to be very clear on what exactly you're going to assess or look at it with a predefined eligibility criteria, meaning that who's going to be in your study, who's not going to be in your study, like eligibility criteria, inclusion and exclusion criteria. So you have to be very clear at your mind. That's the first key characteristic feature. And it should be explicit and reproducible methodology. And it is associated with a systematic search. I just want to emphasize more on this, because if you want to do a literature review, you can just search any of the electronic databases and you can collect a few articles that might be a review or research articles, and you can just put them all together and you can just come up with a review article. That is known as literature review. It's not necessarily you have to collect all the information that exists so far on a particular topic. And even when it comes to search, you need not search all the databases when you want to do a literature review. But when it comes to a systematic review, you have to perform a systematic search in a way that you are not missing any important study or a finding which relates to your research question. That's what I meant by a systematic search. And as I told you, the major purpose of doing a systematic review is to enhance the quality and to decrease the bias. So an assessment of validity of findings, that is nothing but assessing for risk of bias. So this is one of the major key characteristic feature. In none of the review types, we assess the quality of the evidence which we collected in order to make that review. But in systematic reviews, we do the quality assessment. And in the last step, this makes a systematic review completely different. That is a systematic presentation of their characteristics or results. Suppose, for instance, you might be conducting a study, and if you want to represent the results, some set of people or researchers, they frequently use bar diagrams in order to represent their results. Or there are some sort of researchers where they are comfortable using tabular columns, and some other researchers may use pie diagrams or some other graphical representation. It's completely valid, and it's completely up to the researcher. He or she can select how they wanted to represent their findings or results. But when it comes to systematic review, you have to follow, or any researcher has to follow, a specific guidelines in order to represent their findings. That is known as PRISMA. And PRISMA stands for Preferred Reporting Items for Systematic Reviews and Meta-Analysis. So just remember PRISMA. It's a standard guideline which a researcher has to follow in order to represent their findings in any sort of publication, or wherever they wanted to represent their systematic review findings. So these are some of the major characteristic features of a systematic review. So now, why to conduct a systematic review? So as I told you, in order to increase quality and decrease the bias, but still, what makes a systematic review still special when compared to other reviews? That is, if you remember the definition of a systematic review, which I explained earlier, it pulls all the information related to particular topic and brings to one place. It summarizes the whole information that is being available on all the evidence or literature sites, and then it starts assessing or coming out with some findings. It will not conclude or decide just by looking at a few studies or just considering some studies that are being conducted in developed countries or by conducted by well-famed researchers. If you want to do a systematic review, the basic concept is you need to collect each and every information that might be any type of studies, cross-sectional studies, case control studies, case studies, or randomized control trials, whatever it might be, that exists on that particular topic. You have to collect them, and then you have to start assessing the level of quality, bias, and all those things. So that's the reason why we have to conduct a systematic review. The rigorous methodology to summarize the evidence on a given or particular topic. Now let's have a question like, can we rely on high quality, well designed single study rather than a systematic review? Just observe the question very carefully. I just mentioned high quality, which means it completely satisfied the quality domain, meaning it is highly, the evidence, whatever that was being conducted or carried in that particular single study is highly qualitative, and then it is very well designed, meaning that the level of bias or risk of bias is very low, meaning it has satisfied both the criteria of conducting a systematic review, that particular study with high quality and well designed methodology. So can we rely on those findings rather than a systematic review? Yes or no? So just go to the tab pollev.com/SaiKrishnaGU027 and just give your answers. Again, I can see some uncertainty or mixed answers. Some says yes, most of them says no. People are more tending towards no. However, 20% of participants are like, they're not sure about the answer. Okay, I think you can see the results as well. So most of the participants are saying no, we cannot rely. And that's exactly is the answer. No, we cannot rely on that particular study, because the answer is it's a single study. No doubt it is conducted, it might be conducted by experts in developing countries, in a developed country, or they have taken care about the bias section, or the study was carried out in a very well designed way, but still end of the day it's just a single study, meaning we can rely on their conclusions or findings, but at least when it comes to a point where you have to make a healthcare decision or any healthcare intervention which can change the whole idea or whole set of a guideline or whole set of a policy of any particular country or world, then it's not at all recommended to just rely on a single study, irrespective of their quality or design of this study. Because if you look at the evidence which is available, it is like around 32% of the studies are contradicting or conflicting with the existing evidence, meaning if you take 100 studies on particular topic, around 32 studies are not in line or not in parallel with the findings of the rest of the 70% of the studies. They are like they are opposing their findings, meaning that suppose what if you get one study which is among this 32%, just by looking at this 32%, a study which is in this 32%, and if you can you make a healthcare decision? No, we cannot, because the other 70% of the research are like the research findings are contradicting the results of that one particular study. So that's the reason whenever we wanted to make any major changes or any policy makings, we have to rely on systematic reviews which assess the entire evidence from A to Z. It will collect all the studies irrespective of their design, and then it start assessing, and it will come up with their findings or implications which should be more applicable or appropriate to consider. So let's have another example. So here is a question like a couple of years ago, the whole bunch of researchers And there's a lot of buzz going on in internet saying that is early epidural as effective as safe and as late epidurals for women in labor. I assume most of you know what is epidural. For those who don't know, it's a local anesthetic which is given to a pregnant woman during labor in order to prevent pains. So there's a whole bunch of researchers, they're strongly arguing that no epidural should be given in the early phase of labor. At the same time, there are a whole set of other researchers, they are strictly opposing the researchers who are saying that it should be given early phase, and thus they are saying it should be given in the later phases of labor to a pregnant woman. So this is our example, which clearly states the significance of systematic reviews in decision making. So this is the question, and after a lot of research that was carried out, a recent evidence suggests that the timing of epidural is completely up to mother, meaning whenever a mother asks for it, a physician or a GP or a surgeon should give her with an epidural injection. So this is the recent finding or a recent study suggests. But my question is like, can we rely on this finding? Can we just rely on this study finding? No doubt it is highly qualified, meaning conducted by experts in the field in the developed countries. They have taken care of bias and risk of level of evidence domain. So everything looks fair and fine, and they came up with these suggestions. So my question is, can we rely on these findings? Maybe no, or maybe yes, maybe not. So if you personally ask me, I may not completely depend on these findings, because end of the day, it's just a single study. No doubt they might have carried out in a perfect way by taking care of each and every aspect, but still it's a single study. Suppose for instance, just assume this study was conducted in Canada, maybe. So can you just apply these findings in an Indian scenario? No, we cannot, because we really don't know what kind of pregnant women they have enrolled in their study, and the Canadian pregnant women can react can react in a different way, like to the way how an Indian pregnant women react. That might be because of their economical status or socio-economic background or educational status or whatever it might be. So we cannot just pull those findings in other countries and implement in other countries, because it's a single study. So then the Cochrane library, a single best product of Cochrane collaboration, it is an independent high quality evidence for healthcare decision making. Then they have been observing this debate online where some of the researchers are suggesting epidural should be given in the early phase, or some researchers are suggesting it should be given in the later phase. And then they thought, okay, why can't we conduct a systematic review on this and come up with more accurate findings? And then Cochrane researchers reviewed total 9 studies which involved around 15,000 pregnant women, and their results suggest that whoever had early epidurals were less likely to need a cesarean section than those who had late epidurals. Did you observe these findings? On what basis they have made these conclusions? If you go back to our question is all about timing, just timing. Whether should it be given in an early phase or at a later phase during labor. And if you clearly look at these conclusions of a Cochrane systematic review, they told if a pregnant woman had early epidurals, there is a very, very less chance for them undergoing a cesarean section, which means they have completely made these conclusions based upon safety parameters. It's nowhere in the picture. So this is a classic example of what a systematic review is. People are just arguing about the timing, but it came up with a new term saying that bringing a cesarean section into an action, which is really important from a pregnant mother perspective. So here is one more question for you guys. If you're interested, just take out your mobiles or go to the another tab, and the same thing, pollev.com/SaiKrishnaGU027. And the question is, systematic reviews must involve statistical analysis. Should a systematic review include a statistical analysis? I can see mixed answers and a clear spread among the options, where majority of them says yes, a systematic review should involve statistical analysis. Okay, I think participants are changing their mind. Whatever it might be, and the poll response suggests that most of the participants assume that systematic reviews must involve a statistical analysis, which is completely not true. It need not, not necessarily, it should have a statistical analysis. If any systematic review includes a statistical analysis, then it is known as meta-analysis. I already told you earlier, systematic review is like kind of a qualitative analysis, qualitative assessment of evidence. And if you involve any statistical analysis or any quantitative pooling, excuse me, if you pool any sort of quantitative aspects in your study, then it is known as meta-analysis. So this statement is not true. If you have any questions, you can just contact me, or you can just raise a question end of the presentation. So let's very quickly dive into the process of a systematic review. How can we start a systematic review, and how to conduct a perfect ideal systematic review and all. And it's not a rocket science or a Latin science, in order to know. I'll try to keep it very simple, and I'll try to walk you through all these 9 steps of performing a systematic review, starting from how to develop a good research question and ending with how to report findings. Before that, I just wanted to, make a point. Whenever you wanted to start a systematic review, you have to take care of 2 things, 2 prerequisites. Even starting with developing of research question, that is the first step. First, you need to address and answer these 2 questions to yourself. Those are known as prerequisites in order to start a systematic review. So the first prerequisite is, do we really need one? That's a question you have to ask yourself. Do I really need one systematic review? Why should we think in this way? Because whenever you conduct any project or carry any study, we usually never think about this question, at least at the first place. But when it comes to systematic reviews, yes, you have to think this, or you have to ask this question to yourself, because just remember one thing. It's like a thumb rule for systematic reviews. That is, once a systematic review is conducted or finished or done in that particular area, you cannot do a same systematic review. Just remember this thing. Once a systematic review is already done and conducted, you cannot do a same systematic review which addresses the same research question. And there are some exceptions and some cases where we can still do a systematic review, which I'll be talking, in my later on session. Or you can just feel free to approach me if you want to know in which circumstances we can still go ahead with a systematic review, even though we find one systematic review that already exists. So for this, where do you search? First, you have to know whether a systematic review is already done or not. So for that, search Cochrane database. As I told you, Cochrane is an independent global research network which conducts high quality independent systematic reviews. So as a first attempt, search in Cochrane database. And okay, you have searched Cochrane database and you didn't find any relevant studies related to your research question. Then yes, you are happy, but just don't directly dive into the process of systematic review and just don't move forward. But still, as a second attempt, search in Prospero. Prospero is a repository, perhaps you can call it as a registry, maintained by University of York researchers in UK. So there's a lot of difference between Cochrane database and Prospero. Cochrane is a database and Prospero is a registry or a repository. There's a difference between database and repository. So as a second attempt, search in Prospero. And then, okay, fine, you have searched in Prospero and you did not find any relevant studies, then you are good to go. But to be on a safer side, as a last attempt, I suggest you to search using Medline. So Medline is nothing but PubMed for your understanding. PubMed is an interface which we use in order to access Medline. So once you have searched all these three, and still if you don't find any relevant or related articles that is related to your research question, then you are good to go. But if you find any article or any study that has already conducted and published exactly like what you're thinking or what you're going to do, then please drop your idea. You just cannot perform a same systematic review since it's already there. Okay, the second prerequisite is you have to decide who is going to be on your team. It could be a subject expert or a systematic review expert, since it's a systematic review, or search experts, which plays a key role, or a methods experts like who are really good at designing methodological stuff. And at last, if you wanted to extend your systematic review to the further step, that is meta-analysis, just try to pull some meta-analysis expert into your team. So these two are prerequisites where you have to, we should have answers for these questions before starting a systematic review. So let's start with the first step, that is developing a research question. So here I come up with some relevant example related to COVID-19. Can just have a look at this title of a recent systematic review for a while. And whenever you wanted to do a systematic review, just remember you have to put your question in PICO format, that is PICO. P stands for population, or in some instances patients. I stands for intervention, C stands for comparator, and O stands for outcome. So whenever some idea strikes your mind and you are ready to go with a systematic review, just try to put your thought or idea in a form of PICO, P-I-C-O. Okay, then just by looking at this title, you can just frame what is PICO. It's very simple. If you look at the title, it is medical masks versus N95 respirators for preventing COVID-19 in healthcare workers. It's a systematic review and meta-analysis of a randomized controlled trials. So here the patients or population is healthcare workers. It's very clear and pretty straightforward in the title itself. And if you look at I, that is intervention, it is a medical mask. And the comparator could be N95 respirators. You are just assessing the patients or a population, that is healthcare workers, who are using medical masks versus healthcare workers who are using N95 respirators. So it's an intervention and it's a comparator. And the outcome measure or the outcome would be preventing COVID-19, that is the preventing onset of COVID-19 cases. So that's PICO. It's very simple. Just by looking at the title, in most of the cases, you can frame what is PICO. Here is a tip which I wanted to tell you. That is, in order to come up with a better research question, one should have a better knowledge or better understanding of existing literature related to that particular or a specific question, including gaps, uncertainties, loopholes, whatever it might be in that particular area. He or she should have an immense knowledge or experience in order to come up with a well-framed research question. Moving on to the second step, that is inclusion and exclusion criteria. You have to be very, very clear and concrete when you make or frame your inclusion and exclusion criteria. It's very important when it comes to systematic reviews. If you're doing some other review types, it's not necessarily you have to be very particular about your inclusion criteria, like what sort of studies you have included and what sort of studies have been excluded from your systematic review. But when it comes to a systematic review, it's very important to have a clear inclusion and exclusion criteria. you have to represent or mention any loopholes or points of ambiguity if you have that you considered while establishing your study eligibility. And remember one thing, you have to indicate these inclusion and exclusion criteria ahead of time, even before data collection. I mean, data collection in sense, even before searching for the articles or looking up for the articles or conducting the search. You have to be very clear at your mind what's going to be your research question, who is going to be in your study and who is not going to be in your study. So just be very careful while setting up your inclusion and exclusion criteria. The third step would be developing a protocol. I personally suggest, spend a lot of time in developing a protocol. It's like key and a roadmap which can drive you through the entire actual process of conducting or performing a systematic. If you have a better protocol, you'll definitely end up with a better systematic review. So spend a lot of time with the current existing literature and how to search and which databases to search and whom to include, whom to exclude, which sort of studies to be concentrated well and all. If you're not sure on how to develop a proper or well-framed protocol, you can just take help of Prisma 27 item checklist, which can actually walk you through how to end up with a best protocol. It's like a 27 item checklist, and if you can answer those 27 questions, at the end of the 27 questions, a well-framed or structured protocol will be ready for you. So just make leverage of this Prisma statement or Prisma 27 item checklist, which can help you in making a good protocol. And finally, when you're once done developing a protocol, I sincerely recommend you to register it at Prospero. If you remember, I just mentioned Prospero is a registry or a repository maintained by University of York in UK. Just try to register your protocol. It doesn't cost you anything. It's just free of cost and pretty straightforward process. They just ask some questions and you need to fill those questions up. And they just take a week or a couple of weeks time in order to review your protocol. And once they find everything seems good, and they'll approve your protocol and they will assign you with a licensing number, which you can even call it as a copyrighted or like a patent number to be in a simpler words, so that any other person cannot start a similar systematic review. If you remember, I asked you to search whether a systematic review has been already conducted or not in Cochrane, and then Prospero, and then Medline, that is PubMed. So the moment you register your protocol in Prospero, if someone else after a month or a couple of months, if the same idea strikes the researcher minds, and if they want to conduct a systematic review, definitely they will search Prospero, and they find your systematic review. That means they cannot carry forward that systematic review, meaning someone else is already working on this. So that's the reason I sincerely suggest each and everyone to register your protocol at Prospero, but it's not a compulsion. I oftentimes I see most of the researchers here, they just ignore registering their protocol at Prospero, but still it's a good practice. As a fourth step, that is the search. Search plays a key role when it comes to systematic reviews. I can say search is like a heart of a systematic review, which is like really important. If you're really good at search, you can just end up with a very good systematic review. And if you're not good at searching, it's like you can end up with a moderate or modest systematic review. So how to search? I don't want to dig more deeper into this because it's like I can talk a whole day on how to search databases, and if time permits and if given a chance, I'll just meet you in another webinar where I can just talk more details about how to search databases and how to search articles. So first and foremost, whenever you wanted to do a systematic review, try to form or frame keywords. Suppose if you want to do a study related to polypharmacy, if you wanted to make a systematic review related to COVID-19 or whatever it might be, just try to form or frame related keywords related to your particular research question. Or mesh terms. I assume most of you might know what are mesh terms. Mesh stands for medical subject headings. It's like a separate mesh database, which you can access in PubMed. There's a lot of difference between keywords and mesh terms, which I don't want to emphasize now. If you want, you can reach out to me personally, or you can ask me during question and answer session. So just list off all those keywords. Okay, you have done with your keywords. If I wanted to give you a tip how to develop a whole set of keywords, I can say just first frame PICO and looking at your patient or population or interventions, comparator or outcomes, you can just come up with best keywords. Suppose if your population is dialysis patients, or if your population is COVID-19 patients, COVID-19 is going to be your key term. And if your intervention is, if you're assessing the effectiveness or safety of particular drug in COVID-19, so that's going to be one of your keywords. And if your outcome is like, preventing mortality or preventing morbidity, whatever it might be, then that's going to be your key term. So try to look from PICO format perspective, then you can easily come up with your keywords, and you can frame them actually. Okay, then you have done and you have framed your keywords. Where to search them? So what's the next step? So search them using electronic scientific databases. Do you know what are electronic scientific medical databases? So some of the databases which I wanted to list are like PubMed, Embase, Web of Science, Scopus, Cochrane. You can even search using Google Scholar. So these all are like electronic scientific databases. You can start searching your keywords which you found using these databases. And as I told you, the search should be very comprehensive and in a systematic manner. You just don't search in a random way, but just follow a systematic and a comprehensive way when you're searching these databases using key terms. And that's it. Build the search filters based on your inclusion exclusion criteria. Coming to search filters, I hope you might have aware of Boolean operators, that is and, or not in PubMed. So just make sure how to use them appropriately. Then translate to all appropriate databases. You can just translate the same search to all other databases like Scopus, Embase, Web of Science. And search log should include each and every detail, like which key term you have searched first and what are the list of the key terms you have searched. And search must be reproducible, meaning anyone should be able to reproduce the same search. Suppose a person by name X has conducted a systematic review and he mentioned his search strategy in his publication. And if I want to cross check that, I should be able to perform or reproduce the same results when I search using the similar key terms. That is known as reproducibility, which is one of the key aspects and characteristic features of a systematic review. And lastly, search strategy should be included in publication. I personally suggest this. That is, whenever you want to publish a systematic review, just include your search strategy in your publication. It gives a lot of confidence to the reviewers and readers. They'll be like kind of, okay, this is the search strategy and these are the key terms they have used and these are the results they got. It's always a good practice to include search strategies in your publication. So the tip which I wanted to mention here would be, most of you might be wondering, okay, we understood the concept that first step is to build up the key terms and search the key terms using PubMed or Embase, whatever the databases which you wanted to include, and search should be reproducible or it should be comprehensive. But still, if you're not sure or uncertain how to perform a best search or how to build up a very good key terms, I suggest you to go through or take assistance of PRESS, PRESS, which stands for Peer Review Evaluation of Electronic Search Strategy. PRESS stands for, I repeat, Peer Review of Electronic Search Strategy. Just take assistance of PRESS, which will walk you through how to build a good search so that you will develop a sort of confidence. And try to keep on document, whatever. Suppose if you have searched PubMed, how many hits or how many citations you have got, just document them. For the first try or the second try or using the other database, keep try to document the results. So let's move on to the fifth step. That is, okay, you have carried out a search, and suppose you have ended up with 100 studies, 100 studies from all over the databases. So now it's time to review those studies. You cannot just simply include all those 100 studies in your systematic review, but you have to review those studies. So just look at the, just let us look at, have a look at the level of reviewing. So as a first step, for instance, if you have 100 studies, as a first step, you can go through the titles of each and every study, just the titles. Because in most of the cases, just by looking at the title, you can just decide whether that study is going to fit in your systematic review or not. As I just shown you a title of a recent systematic review, and we are able to fill up what is PICO. It's pretty straightforward, right? So just have a look at the titles. And if after looking at the title screening, if you feel like 50 studies are like not matching up with your research question, just exclude them. And for the next set of 50 studies, just go to the second step, that is abstract screening. Just go through the abstract of those 50 studies, suppose for example, and abstract is like a summary of any particular study that was conducted. Just by looking at the abstract or a summary, you will have a complete whole picture of what's the interventions they have used, and what are the outcome measures they have used, and what are their inclusion exclusion criteria and each and everything mostly. So by looking at the abstract, you should be able to exclude or include those studies into your systematic review. Suppose out of 50 studies, you felt 20 studies are not relevant to your systematic review, so try to exclude them. And for the rest of 30 articles, the rest 30 articles will come to the next step, that is you have to look at the studies eligibility screening, like what are the each and every studies inclusion criteria or exclusion criteria. So what are the PICOs they have used, that is the patients or population or interventions comparison and outcome measures or outcomes. And just looking at the eligibility criteria, you will be able to decide very strongly on whether that study is going to fit your systematic review or not. Suppose out of 30 studies left, assume that 10 studies are out, they are not matching, just exclude them. And for the rest of the 20 studies, move on to the next step, that is study content screening. Meaning for the rest of the 20 studies, try to screen the entire paper starting from its title to its conclusions or the references, so that you will have the whole idea of what exactly the study has looked at. And out of those 20 studies, if you for example, if you think the 10 studies are meeting your eligibility criteria of your systematic review to the most, then just include those 10 systematic reviews in your final systematic review. So this is how it looks like, and this is known as Prisma flowchart. Typically, whatever systematic review or a meta-analysis paper you take, this is going to be the first figure in any systematic review. This is known as Prisma flowchart. As I told you, Prisma stands for preferred reporting items for systematic reviews and meta-analysis. If you clearly observe this figure in the first step, by the way, this Prisma flowchart is from my recent systematic review. And as a first step, I searched PubMed, Scopus, Embase, and Web of Science, and you can see the total number of citations that I ended up with. And the first step, I included a total of around 4,300 articles in my systematic review. And I just followed all the process which I have mentioned earlier, that is level of reviewing titles, content, eligibility criteria, abstracts, and everything. And finally, I ended up with 10 studies. If you can see the last step, that is studies included, and is equal to 10. That is, I included 10 studies in my systematic review. So this should be there if you want to do a systematic review. This is known as a Prisma flowchart. Then we'll go to the sixth step, that is data extraction. Okay, you ended up with 10 studies and you have included those 10 studies in your study. Now it's time to extract or pull some data out of those 10 studies. And remember, be very consistent in order to extract the data. Meaning, suppose among those 10 studies, for 5 studies you are just extracting mean age or gender, and for the rest of 5 studies you are not reporting mean age, or you are not mentioning the mean age. It's not like that. You have to maintain some consistency in order to extract the data. Meaning you have to list down the outcomes, or you have to list down the elements which you wanted to extract from that particular paper. Being said that, you might be wondering, you might be asking, it's not the case each and every study will have the same elements. Suppose some studies might report their mean age or some other what's the blood pressure or what's the mean HbA1c of the participants, and other study might not. So in that case, mention mean age and just try to report it as not applicable or not reported or something like that, but just mention and be very consistent in data extraction among all the studies whichever you include. Typically, it is recommended that two researchers should perform the data extraction independently. So this is how it looks like, the data extraction table in the systematic review. And in most of the cases, this will be the second table, the first or the second table column in systematic reviews, where you can find characteristics and key findings of each and every study that you have included in your systematic review. If you look at each column says, suppose in this example, again, this is from my systematic review. In the first column, it says author, name of the author, year, country that the study has been conducted, study design, sample size, and the mean age. So I have reported all those things in the first column, and moving on to the second column, that could be aim of the study or objectives of the study. Next, it could be interventions or what are the outcomes they have used and what are their key findings, and ending up with their conclusions or the summary. So this is how a data extraction table looks like. Suppose, for example, if you're not sure what are the data elements in order to pull it out from any particular study, here is a tip. Cochrane has come up with excellent data extraction sheets, which you can make use of them. Just Google Cochrane data extraction sheets, and you can find a couple of them. You can just take one as a reference, and you can just follow those data sheets in order to pull the data or extract the data from the studies which you have included. It will guide you very clearly. The other tip would be like, just look at the published systematic reviews related to your research question or your topic. Suppose I have shown my data extraction table or my Prisma flowchart. Just have a look at already published systematic reviews in your field or your that address your research question, so that you will have an idea of what elements to be extracted or what data characteristics should be reported. So this is the tip I wanted to give when it comes to data extraction. And in particular to softwares, Revman, which is also known as Review Manager, it's developed by Cochrane collaboration. It's free of use if you are doing any sort of research related to academic institutions or education institutions. And the other one would be Epi Reviewer. I don't think so it's a free version, but Revman would be free of charge. But Epi Reviewer would be, you can get 1 month free trial version, and you can also use Excel spreadsheets in order to pull the data extraction, or you can use them in order to conduct a systematic review or meta-analysis. Let's move on to seventh step, that is quality assessment. If you remember, I told in a system, if you want to do a systematic review, you must include all the studies, no matter what, where the study has conducted or who has conducted a study, with what standards the study has been conducted. Regardless of all these things, you have to include if that satisfies your inclusion criteria. That might be like, suppose in the 10 studies you have included in your systematic review in my previous example, one study might be from Canada, one study might be from Europe, one study might be from India, one study might be from Guntur, or whatever it might be. You have to include all the studies, and then you have to start assessing. Then you might be asking me, like, if we include all the studies irrespective of their quality or irrespective of bias or their standards of the evidence or the confidence, how can you come up with a better quality results in our systematic review? So in this step, we are going to address the quality aspects. So these are some of the well-known scales or tools which are widely used around the world in order to assess the quality of studies that are being included in systematic reviews. Suppose if you are including a systematic studies that are observational studies, you can just pick any one of these scales and you can assess the quality of that particular study. Among these scales, I can suggest Acrobat and RSI, which is obviously considered as a gold standard, that is developed by Cochrane collaboration. It is known as a Cochrane risk of bias assessment tool. You can just use this tool in order to assess or grade the quality of the studies that you might be included in your systematic review. And there are also some other scales like Donson Blacks and Robbins I. And recently I found NIH scales which are quite impressive. And in my recent systematic review, I have used scales developed by National Institute of Health, that is NIH. Suppose if you are including studies that are randomized controlled trials, RCTs, you can just use, even in RCTs, Cochrane has come up with their own risk of bias tool, that is risk of bias 2.0 is the latest version, updated revised version. So you can use ROB 2.0. And there are other scales like Gerard scale, Pedro scale, grade approach. Typically in developed countries like Canada, we actually use grade scale in order to assess the quality for the studies that are included in systematic reviews. So using these scales, you can just assess the quality of study. Suppose, for example, you can just download or download any article that might be observational study or a cross-sectional study, cohort study, case control study, whatever it might be, and you can just pick up one scale and you can just assess the quality of that particular study. Suppose if you're PharmD interns already, you can just assess your own PharmD project which you have done in your PharmD 5th year. Just pick up any one of these scales and assess. Usually it's like 7 to 10 questions typically each tool consists of. So if you just answer those 10 questions like yes or no answers, you can, by the end of the 10 questions or whatever set of questions, it will be giving you a score, meaning that much quality your study or that particular study has. It's pretty straightforward. I'll just show you one example. So this is how it looks like. Again, this is from my systematic review where I have used, as I told, I have used NIH scale in order to assess the quality of studies that I have included in my systematic review. If you look at the columns of these systematic reviews like 9, 10, 17, 18, 11, they are actually studies. I included 10 studies and there are 10 citations, there are 10 studies. And if you look at the left-hand side, each row is a single specific question related to their quality. Suppose if you look at the first question, are the questions and objectives sufficiently described? So if you feel like in that particular paper, if you feel like the objectives are clearly described with inclusion exclusion criteria, so you can say yes, then automatically it will be allotting it 1 point to that question. And coming to the second question, for example, is study design evident and appropriate? If you feel like no, the study design is not appropriate in order to conduct the study, you can just say no for that study and it gives 0. So once you are done with answering all the questions, if you look at the bottom column, that is summary score, which is actually represented in percentages, you can observe the first study has 90% of quality, the second study has 86%, followed by 77, 95, 100, 90, 90, 80, 80, and 90. So all the 10 studies have this specific summary score as which depicts the overall quality of that particular study. So this is how it looks like. Moving on to the 8th step, that is data analysis. It actually depends upon the type of question or the type of data you are actually collecting for your systematic review. If you are collecting nominal data or ordinal data or scale data, something like that, it depends. Or else whether if you want to do a meta-analysis, that is a quantitative pooling of a systematic review data. If you wanted to conduct a mixed methods research, so the data analysis, it completely depends upon what exactly you wanted to assess and look at. And also you can also conduct, if you're suppose if you're conducting a meta-analysis, you can also conduct a sensitivity analysis. I hope you might have most of you are aware of this particular term, that is sensitivity analysis, which is also known as subgroup analysis. You can also do that by just eliminating some of the studies of which are of low quality or with limited sample size, or if you want to look at if you want to give more weightage to more quality studies, you can just perform a sensitivity analysis. So coming to our last step, that is reporting of the systematic review findings. As I mentioned earlier, you cannot just randomly mention or report your systematic review findings. You have to follow a standard specific guideline known as PRISMA, that is preferred reporting items for systematic reviews and meta-analysis in order to report your findings. And also, I recommend you to go through the journal's author's guidelines. If whenever you wanted to submit your systematic review for any specific journal, just review their specific author guidelines before framing or forming your results to be reported. And if you don't find any guidelines, which will not be the case in most of the cases, definitely each journal will have their own author guidelines, and each author guidelines will have some sort of guidelines in order to report their findings. Suppose, for example, for systematic reviews, they clearly mention you have to follow PRISMA guidelines in order to report your findings. But in case if you don't find any guidelines, just review other systematic reviews that are already being published in that journal to see or to check whether how they reported their findings. And as I told you, just follow PRISMA checklist in order to report your findings of a systematic review. And with this, it's the entire process of conducting a systematic review, starting from developing a very good research question and ending up with the reporting of findings. So here is a very quick question for you guys. After all this talk, the question is, systematic reviews must be conducted by experts. So just go to the tab and type polev.com/SaiKrishnaGU027 and answer this question. Do you think systematic reviews should be only conducted by experts? True, false, maybe? I'll just give you 5 to 10 seconds of time. Most of you say no, it is not. It need not to be conducted by an expert. However, 25% of you suggest that. 40% of you suggest that yes, it has to be conducted. Okay, now it is 50%. So it's like exact split between the participants, where 50% of the participants suggest that yes, it has to be conducted by experts, and no, it has to be conducted by everyone. In this case, you can go with a systematic review since the evidence is conflicting. Okay, so if you personally ask me this question, I could say maybe or false. In some cases, not necessarily it has to be conducted by experts. Any student can conduct a systematic review, or any researcher can conduct a systematic review, or a particular organization or a college or an institute or an individual or independent researcher can conduct a systematic review. But if you are conducting a national-wide systematic review, which can bring changes into the decision and policy making, then definitely it has to be conducted by experts. At least if you are at a student level, it doesn't mean that you can't conduct a systematic review. You can conduct a systematic review, but just make sure that at least you have some expert in your team, a systematic review expert or a meta-analysis expert in your team, so that they can take care of all of the stuff. Okay, let's now dive into the significance of systematic reviews or the importance of systematic reviews, with a special emphasis on COVID-19. So here is one more interesting question for you. Have you heard about any drugs that are being under investigation for COVID-19 so far? Don't just type yes or no, just type the name of the drugs. Did you hear any drug or drugs that are being investigated for the treatment of COVID-19 in the recent days? You can just type your answers by logging on to polev.com/SaiKrishnaGU027. Just type this in your, okay, hydroxychloroquine, perfect. Any other drugs which are being tested? Remdesivir, hydroxychloroquine, nice. I'm glad that you're at least coming up with few answers. 5 more seconds and then I'll just move on. Azithromycin, perfect. Chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine, okay. Anything else? It might be a drug, it might be a therapy, anything it might be that is being investigated for the treatment of COVID-19. Plasma therapy, perfect. Yeah, so it's great to see answers coming up, and I absolutely agree with you. Like chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, plasma therapy, remdesivir. These all are the drugs that are being considered for investigation under for the treatment of COVID-19. But let's see these drugs from an eye of a systematic review. So let's start with chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine. These both drugs, actually hydroxychloroquine is a derivative of chloroquine, and it's an anti-malarial drug, as you already know. And it has gained a lot of interest, and most of the well-known popular politicians like Donald Trump, the president of United States, even he advocated and endorsed this drug in initial days, initial March or early March or early April, saying that H works better with A, hydroxychloroquine better works with azithromycin, and he completely endorsed this product. I don't know why, based on what findings he has endorsed, but still, and it didn't end there. And one other politician from the same group of Donald Trump has tweeted that hydroxychloroquine has been shown to have 100% effective rate treating COVID-19. I don't know based upon what study findings he had made this tweet. Only he should be aware of. It just didn't stop or confined to politicians. It also endorsed or advocated by some of the healthcare professionals like GPs and specialists like rheumatologists. Even they endorsed, saying, they recommended that hydroxychloroquine could be used as a potential treatment for the treatment of COVID-19. And there exists a lot of uncertainty or disparities between using these hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine for the treatment of COVID-19. But let's see what a systematic review suggests, or recent or the latest evidence says. So here is a latest systematic review that was published recently this month, where the authors or the investigators looked at the safety profiles, just the safety profiles, not the effectiveness. Forget about effectiveness, whether the hydroxychloroquine is effective or not in treating COVID-19. But it's always, we have the first priority is looking at the safety profiles. That should be our first priority. So a recent systematic review and meta-analysis where they have included 23 studies that looked at chloroquine use and 17 studies that looked at hydroxychloroquine use, which included around 1,000 patients in their both control and cases and control arms, and around 500 cases when it comes to hydroxychloroquine. Let's quickly look at their results. If you look at their results, the relative risk for COVID-19 group is 2.25, meaning that the patients who received chloroquine are 2.2 times more likely to get adverse drug reactions, or they got severe adverse drug reactions when compared to the group who have taken placebo. And coming to hydroxychloroquine, the relative risk suggests 1.28, meaning there is a 28% higher chances or higher risk of patients to develop adverse drug reactions if they take hydroxychloroquine when compared to patients who have taken placebo, which is concerning. And they ended up saying that, or stating that the overall adverse events were significantly higher among participants taking either chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine when compared with participants or patients taking placebo. So it's like, so do you recommend taking hydroxychloroquine, or chloroquine to treat COVID-19 based upon these conclusions of systematic review? No, we wouldn't. So let's look at another systematic review and meta-analysis, which looked at both effectiveness and safety perspectives. In the previous systematic review, they just looked at safety profiles, but in this systematic review, they looked at both effectiveness and safety profiles, where they have included around 100,000 patients from 26 studies. And they found that they didn't find any significant clinical effectiveness for hydroxychloroquine regimen in treatment of COVID-19. If you look at the relative risk, it's 0.96. And I just warn you or suggest you, don't just get deceived by looking at 0.96, which is really tempting, meaning that if relative risk is less than 1, it is favoring the treatment, meaning in this case hydroxychloroquine can be given. But be careful and look at the confidence intervals. If you look at the confidence intervals, it is 0.76 and the other end is 1.2, which means it crossed 1, meaning it is no more statistically significant and we cannot rely on these findings. And if you look at the combination of hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin, as Donald Trump said, H works better with A, it's the outcome is still more worsened. The relative risk is 2.15, meaning the patients who ever received hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin combination, they have 115% of higher risk of getting adverse drug reactions or not getting benefited from these drugs. So they concluded that it's like 1.5 times higher mortality rate among hydroxychloroquine group, 2.5 times higher mortality rate in the combination of hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin group. And finally, they concluded that it's 4 times higher adverse events are associated with hydroxychloroquine group with an odds ratio of 3.86, which is significant to an extent. So this is what the evidence of systematic review suggests. And do you know what? This is the recent statement, very recent statement, just day before yesterday. The US FDA has revoked the use of EUA of hydroxychloroquine. I don't know how many of you know this. Initially in early March, I believe US FDA has approved EUA for hydroxychloroquine, meaning emergency use authorization. It means it can be used for the patients in some particular conditions. But after the systematic reviews and looking at this evidence of randomized controlled trials, immediately, just a couple of days ago, FDA revokes its EUA with hydroxychloroquine. And it says, today's request to revoke is based on new information, including clinical trial data results that have led BRADA to conclude this drug may not be effective no more to treat COVID-19. So that's the impact of systematic reviews and the evidence in making healthcare decisions. So let's move on to the other drug, that is corticosteroids. So there's a lot of debate going on and a lot of buzz online where some suggest that corticosteroids should be given to patients with severe COVID-19, where some researchers suggest no, it's of no use giving corticosteroids because it can still worsen the condition of a COVID-19 patient as it has immunosuppressant activity. But still, it's a lot of debate going on. I don't know whether you are following Twitter or any other sites. It's still an uncertainty for physicians all around the world whether to prescribe corticosteroids in order to prevent or treat COVID-19. And these are the major headings of the newspapers and online blogs. These are like this. One online major blogs writes saying major study finds common steroid reduces deaths among patients with severe COVID-19. However, another newspaper, which is very well known among our Indians, that is the Hindu, states or claims for Indian doctors express cautious endorsement for dexamethasone for COVID-19, which is like in contrast to this previous statement. And the other headline is like this: a cheap steroid is the first drug to show to reduce deaths in COVID-19 patients. Again, it's like, disparities and loopholes in order to use these corticosteroids. And one more Indian news channel, it says steroids, are they really a game changer in COVID-19 treatment? And the last statement is like, despite guidelines, controversy still remains over use of corticosteroids in COVID-19. You can see these are like, these all statements are not in line and they are just differing, and there are a lot of uncertainties being discussed on internet. So let's look at the systematic reviews, what exactly they came up with their conclusions. This is a recent systematic review which published this week, in fact, that published in CMAJ, Canadian Medical Association Journal, which is like very well-known journal in Canada. And based upon those the articles published in the journal, any major decisions can be made here. So let's look at the systematic review that published this week on CMAJ, where they have assessed both efficacy and safety of corticosteroids in COVID-19 patients, just based on the evidence of other coronavirus infections like influenza, SARS, MERS, and all. So in this systematic review, they have included one cohort study with 84 patients with COVID-19 and ARDS. ARDS is acute respiratory distress syndrome, and 5 cohort studies which included patients only with COVID-19 but not ARDS. 3 studies, that is 2 cohort and 1 RCT, including 7,000 patients with SARS, and 2 cohort studies including around 600 patients with MERS. Let's look at their findings and conclusions. And they found that among patients with severe COVID-19 without ARDS provided no evidence of reducing the mortality with corticosteroids. In fact, it increased the mortality upon use of corticosteroids with a hazard ratio of 2.3, meaning there is a more than 2.3 times higher risk of patients who are receiving corticosteroids in order to end up dying. And they finally concluded that observational data from considering SARS, MERS, influenza, and all other outbreaks, including COVID-19, the use of corticosteroids provided a very low quality evidence of no reduction in mortality. You need to be very clear and in order to while you are interpreting the findings, because I just mentioned they didn't find any improvement in the mortality. In fact, there are more cases of deaths in severe COVID-19 patients without ARDS. The reason why I'm stressing here is their study results suggested that in patients with COVID-19 and ARDS, there is some benefit of usage of corticosteroids in order to prevent mortality, but not just solely in COVID-19 patients. So let's look at some of the another study which looked at usage of corticosteroids in coronavirus patients. It has published in Journal of Infectious Diseases very recently this month, where they have included around 5,000 patients from 15 studies. And if you look at their results, it's like quite wondering. The corticosteroid treatment was significantly associated with higher mortality rate with relative risk more than 2, and longer length of stay, higher rate of bacterial infection, hypokalemia, hyperglycemia, and hypocalcemia. However, hypoglycemia and hypocalcemia are not statistically significant since their confidence intervals are touching 1 and beyond less than 1. They are not statistically significant. But when you look at the mortality, length of stay, and bacterial infections, hypokalemia, these are like a major findings they have reported in this systematic review. And finally, they concluded that corticosteroid use may lead to increased mortality and severe adverse reactions. Therefore, corticosteroids should not be used, or should be used with caution when you are prescribing for the patients with COVID-19. And I don't know, I just wanted to mention and talk about recovery trial, which has gained a lot of reputation and a lot of buzz over internet this week. When I was just going through my Twitter feed, I found most of the people are saying, wow, the findings of recovery trial are really amazing and impressive, where they have observed one-third of improvements among COVID-19 patients. But just remember, the one-third of improvement is only with severe COVID-19 patients with ARDS, and that improvement is just for the usage of oxygen ventilations and length of stay. It's not on mortality or something else. So just make sure of these points. Let's move on to the other fascinating drug, which is under investigation for potential COVID-19 treatment, that is remdesivir. Basically, it's an antiviral drug, and these are the headlines from well-known newspapers and blogs. It says remdesivir has emerged as a possible and potential COVID-19 treatment. What happens next? And the other headlines as follows. It says antiviral drug remdesivir can help fight the coronavirus, but can patients get it? Even I'm kind of a person, I'm really wondering, forget about effectiveness or safety. It might have or it could show a positive or potential effectiveness or safety outcomes in future trials. But still, I wonder, can patients afford for this drug? Suppose, for example, I just saw during my Twitter feed, I just saw one person posting or commenting saying that, why would I get remdesivir, which costs around 4,500 bucks for a regimen, while I get corticosteroid or hydroxychloroquine for 5x. It means hydroxychloroquine or corticosteroids, which have little bit shown a little bit of improvement. Those are very cheaper drugs where it can cost just $5 for a patient. When it comes to remdesivir, it costs $4,500 in order to for the 10 days of the treatment for COVID-19. Around, it's like $450 per each pill. It's like huge. Patients cannot afford, even though if it comes up with a potential possible positive outcomes of effectiveness and safety. So that's what my major concern is. However, so the other headline is as follows. Canadian experts don't see remdesivir as a COVID-19 killer. This is not a silver bullet, which is completely in contrast to the above statements. However, regardless of all this news, FDA has approved its EUA, emergency use authorization for usage of remdesivir and for the treatment of COVID-19. So let's look at the systematic reviews which assess the efficacy and safety of remdesivir. So they have included two randomized controlled trials, which has around 1,300 patients, and two case reports, which has around 80 patients in the systematic review. And these study findings inferred that remdesivir did not decrease all-cause mortality, that is death. And again, don't be deceived by looking at relative risk of 0.71, which means it is favoring use of remdesivir. But when you look at the 95% confidence intervals, the higher end crosses 1, that is 1.28, meaning it is no more statistically significant, meaning we cannot rely on these findings. And the other finding is it did not reduce the length of stay or the need for invasive ventilation, the oxygen ventilation. Again, still, even though it has ended up with a rate risk of 0.57, it crossed 1 with their confidence interval, meaning we cannot actually make the final conclusions of, or we cannot encourage usage of remdesivir. And if you look at the adverse drug reactions were similar between remdesivir and placebo arms. If I compare, even if you compare the usage of corticosteroids or hydroxychloroquine, chloroquine with remdesivir is a bit at the higher end, and it is showing a bit positive outcomes, meaning at least their relative risks are less than 1, irrespective of their confidence intervals, and even their adverse events are not worsened when compared to the placebo arms. It's like similar adverse events were noticed or found between placebo and the treatment groups. So it's kind of encouraging, but still. And they concluded that at this point, as we don't have a proper evidence, since both findings are not statistically significant, remdesivir should not be recommended for the treatment of severe COVID-19. So finally, let's move on to convalescent plasma therapy, which has gained a lot of concern and a lot of which pull a lot of interest these days. And the headlines from Kerala says COVID-19 patient recovered after he was administered with plasma therapy. However, a news from Winnipeg, from here, it says Health Canada approves nationwide COVID-19 plasma trial. And in contrast, on the other hand, the other headline of a newspaper or an article suggests there is no benefit observed from convalescent plasma therapy in COVID-19 patients, and a new study finds. And again, still, if you can observe, the evidence is uncertain. Suppose if the evidence is pretty straightforward and out of 100 studies, 99 studies are saying the same thing, then there is no point of conducting a systematic review. But when the evidence is uncertain and when there are a lot of disparities between the evidence, where 50 studies are saying, yes, we can use this drug, and 50% of studies are saying no, we cannot use this drug, and then it comes the role of a systematic review in order to assess and come up with a very good findings. And from the Medscape, it says convalescent plasma. Is it just a flavor of the month or a valid COVID-19 treatment? However, US FDA has approved its EUA authorization for usage of convalescent plasma therapy, which has recently published in BMJ. So let's look at what, with a view of systematic reviews, what exactly it is saying usage of CPT, convalescent plasma therapy, in order to treat COVID-19. So there's a recent study which published this month in CMAJ, Canadian Medical Association Journal, where they have assessed the efficacy and safety of convalescent plasma for severe COVID-19 based on other pandemics like influenza, MERS, and SARS. So their findings inferred that if you look at the mortality, they have considered 4 randomized controlled trials, and the relative risk is 0.94. However, just don't be fooled by looking at 0.94, but look at the confidence intervals which crossed 1.8, meaning it's no longer statistically significant. And if you look at the complete recovery, where they have included patients from 2 randomized clinical controlled trials, the odds ratio is more than 1, which means it's not favoring the usage of CPT. The same thing with length of stay, where they have included 3 patients from 3 randomized controlled trials, and the mean difference or weighted mean difference is 1.62, minus 1.62, which is not statistically significant, because if you look at the confidence intervals, the one end says minus and other end says plus, meaning it has crossed 1. However, if you look at this severe adverse events, the same thing, it's not statistically significant. It's like the results are uncertain, meaning that there is no clear evidence or evidence suggests the usage of convalescent plasma therapy in order to treat COVID-19 patients. And that's what they concluded, saying that considering all the studies of non-COVID-19 infections like influenza, SARS, MERS, revealed that CPT has minimal or no benefit in the treatment of COVID-19. So that's everything where I have mentioned. Where I wanted to mention related to COVID-19 scenario. I just picked a few examples, that especially with respect to drugs. Since we being pharmacists, I wanted to bring up more examples related to drugs. But there are so many other examples you can look at with respect to COVID-19. Suppose some people says, we have to wear masks in order to prevent the transmission or contain the control of COVID-19. While some people suggest, it's not really useful wearing a mask, because you cannot actually contain COVID-19 using the mask. It's like a lot of uncertainty, and some people says, okay, we can use masks, but you have to use only N95 masks or N95 respirators, and there is no role of cotton usage of cotton masks or any other masks. So there's a lot of disparities, and some people says following social and physical distancing could inhibit or could flatten the curve during this COVID-19. Whereas I have read a paper saying that there is no much impact of social and physical distancing in order to prevent COVID-19. It's like really interesting stuff. So there are a lot of examples where a systematic review can play a role. But these are very few examples which just solely targeted on usage of drugs, various drugs in the scenario of COVID-19. So I hope most of you, or at least some of you, might inspired by my talk or by the methodology of systematic review itself. And if you still further want to learn a lot of things or conduct a systematic review, I would strongly suggest these 2 handbooks for you. The first one would be Cochrane Handbook, which is like handy short book, like maybe 100-150 pages, and it's not free of cost, but it's free to access. You can actually go through online, and you can actually read or go through the handbook. And the other one would be a handbook developed by NIH, that is Institute of Medicine's Standards for Systematic Review. So I suggest these 2 books as a recommendations for you guys. So these are the 2 books I'm talking about. One is Cochrane Handbook for Systematic Reviews and Meta-Analysis, which is very short, and probably in most cases it would be in layman language, where anyone can understand like how to perform basic systematic review and meta-analysis. And the other book which is developed by NIH. So let's very quickly look at the myths about systematic reviews. During my discussions with my peers or reviewers or researchers or my colleagues, I used to listen a lot of things about systematic reviews being discussed. So I just want to clear the air related to the myths of systematic reviews among you participants. So the first one is systematic reviews are same as ordinary literature reviews, but just bigger in size. It's a myth. It's not a there is a lot of difference between literature review and a systematic review, and it's not same. Systematic review is not as same as a literature review. And systematic reviews include only randomized control trials. No, it's not. You can do a systematic review using an observational study or using case control studies or using case series or case reports, whatever it might be. But also you can include randomized control trials, but not only randomized control trials. Systematic reviews are of no relevance outside of health and medicine. It's not true. If you can remember and go back to my slides, I have mentioned some well-known organizations that perform systematic reviews, and one among those which performs systematic reviews in the field of health and medicine is Cochrane Collaboration. Systematic reviews must involve statistical analysis or statistical synthesis. It's not true. If you include statistical analysis, it is known as meta-analysis. And most of the times, oftentimes, systematic reviews, need not to be in a statistical manner. The other one is systematic reviews must be conducted by experts. As I told, in most of the cases, maybe yes, but even a student or a researcher who is interested and who is very well trained under the supervision of an expert or a systematic review, they can go ahead with performing a systematic review. And lastly, systematic reviews are not really research. I don't agree with this statement, although systematic reviews are just reviews, but not research, as name itself suggests. But still, you are doing a lot of research in order to do a systematic review. You are searching a lot of databases, and you are doing a lot more than actually conducting one single research study. So it's not actually a true statement. So these are some of the myths which I identified, and I wanted to make sure that none of these statements are true related to systematic reviews. So in a nutshell, why systematic reviews are considered as a gold standard or powerhouse of evidence while decision making in healthcare interventions, because it summarizes all the literature. It will not just look at one point of one aspect or one set of studies. It summarizes the whole body of literature, meaning it considers all the pros and cons, negative studies or positive studies, each and everything, and they comes up with their findings. And obviously, and then doing this way, the quality of systematic reviews or the quality of evidence will be improved with less bias, meaning the entire process of a systematic review is transparent and reproducible, which I have explained earlier. Thus, maintaining the quality and standards of bias, it gives more power to systematic reviews, meaning we can more rely on those findings of those systematic review. And thus, it can act as evidence-based practice in order to bring any changes in healthcare decisions. So that's it. And as a take-home messages, I can say systematic reviews take a lot of time, meaning it's not a one-man show or a one-man army. You need to have a team, and it's a team effort, and it might take a lot of time, like 1 year or more than a year. It depends upon how good and how well you are at searching and screening the papers and coming up with findings. And also do a systematic review as it is a most appropriate, and it uses systematic methods, but just not that you wanted to author a systematic review. Just don't think selfishly or something like that, I wanted to publish a systematic review, but just think from the society and from the perspective of need. If there is a need, and if you have met the needs and the criteria, then go ahead with a systematic review. Then systematic reviews need a lot of teamwork. As I told, it's just not can be done by a single person or a couple of persons. You need to include a lot of people like researchers, statisticians, librarians, or methods experts, or faculty members, whatever it might be, from different sites or different countries. So it needs a lot of teamwork and a lot of time to do it. Last but not least, first know your topic before starting a systematic review. You need to know the complete at least a complete picture of that particular topic which you wanted to do conduct a systematic review. You need to know what are the uncertainties, what are the literature exactly saying, what are the loopholes, what are the gaps that exist in that particular area, so that you can fill those gaps through your systematic review. So first know your topic very well, then you can end up with a very good research question, ultimately with a very good findings. So that's everything about systematic reviews I have. And if you have any questions related to systematic reviews, or any other details if you wanted to know related to research, or any questions like how to come to abroad, or how to publish a paper, feel free to reach me out on Twitter, LinkedIn, or Facebook. And just remember these, I just listed them based upon my priority. Just don't directly text message me or email me. You can contact me by LinkedIn or email or Twitter. Then you can just we can just have a fruitful discussion. And thank you everyone for giving me this opportunity. And the session is over to the audience, and I'm happy to take any questions if you have.
Thank you, Dr. Sai Krishna. So audience, if you're having any doubts, please raise your hands and you can ask your doubts.
Yeah, participant can ask, can interact with the Dr. Sai Krishna. Session has entirely explained very briefly, concisely. Not only covering systematic review, we also covered global corona, what situations are happening, how drugs are using. That's very nice. So I think you have satisfied all participants with your full of explanation. Madam?
Yes. In absence of questions, I would like to thank Dr. Sai Krishna. Thank you so much, sir. This is an amazing dissection on systematic review and meta-analysis. You have completely give the total detail. If those who attended this session, definitely they will use these tips and these methods process how to do the systematic review and as well as the meta-analysis, especially how explained related to this corona and whatever the research which has been published related to that of novel coronavirus. I hope that every participant utilize this opportunity to do good number of systematic reviews and meta-analysis from in India. I really thank you, sir, for your cooperation since 10 days. As I explained in the introduction, you are very cooperative and you are very care about the session and as well as the topic selection and each and everything. I would again, I am thanking you for being with us for this session, and also we are expecting your cooperation for the future years also. Thank you so much, Dr. Sai Krishna Garu.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, madam.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for all the participants for taking your time and making this happen. And see you guys soon with some other webinar. Take care. Bye-bye. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So I'm having just an announcement for the participant. You don't worry about the feedback forms. I have given the link in YouTube. Just you can be find there under the YouTube channel of Chalapati Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences. There you can find the college name. Just you click on the college name and you will find the session detail. By clicking on the session detail, you will be get the Google form, that is the feedback form. Every day you will get the form and you can fill and submit it. So we'll consider the form for issuing of the certificates. Thank you so much, the participants, for your active participation.
End the session.
Thank you.
Thank you, one and all. We are closing the session. Have a nice day.